But going back to the point of, I found it interesting when you spoke about China's influence in Africa. Can you give us some more from your experience? How have their influence there? How has it been taken? And also another point before actually we go into that, I find many, even when I sometimes speak on television or I speak to people, people consider Africa a homogeneous, continent, but they forget that it's 54 nations.
It's
all
anything
with their
but.
own, with their own ambition, with their own agenda,
No,
with their own
but
development,
the problem is
their own leaderships.
But I would even question whether there are 54 nations.
Yeah, there you go as well.
I mean, the nations were imposed by the colonizing powers,
right.
and many times, and you had so many civil war situations in Africa precisely because someone came in and drew a boundary where there were two tribes that didn't really get along, and trying to get them both on the same space is very challenging.
Right.
So,
do you think it's helpful speaking about Africa as a because obviously Africa as a continent is well to be
so
said,
diverse.
There's so many things happening in that continent.
So you can't.
You can never speak of Europe as one thing either. You can't speak of anything as one thing.
Exactly. But mistake number one in Africa is to consider that everything's the same.
Yeah.
I mean, crikey. I mean, go to Sierra Leone or Liberia, and then go down to Angola or DRC or Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, or
any of these
Nairobi,
places,
or Kigali. Kigali is a different place altogether, right?
Different beast
in Rwanda. But you're asking how the Chinese influence demonstrates itself in Africa.
How has it been taken?
And how has it been taken? So
I think that's probably really broad itself as a question. But can you?
No. But it's very interesting. Let me give you my Angolan experience. Right. So. Every third or fourth vehicle you see on the road is Chinese, especially the trucks. They're all yellow and red and orange and so on. Sino truck,
Sino colors.
Yes, the so-called taxis, African taxis, which used to be Toyota Hiace, are now Chinese versions of that. The Chinese build cities within cities and infrastructure and whatever, and they bring their own workforce, right?
Yeah.
It's huge. So the road signs are, so for example, in Angola, they're both in Chinese and in Portuguese.
Okay.
And then you have a very, very interesting phenomenon as well, which is, of course, Chinese population moving there and establishing themselves there. You start having a mix between Chinese and the local population. So you have Chinese kid with African roots. And also the other phenomena is the spin-off. So the Chinese tend to go into these countries as part of state-owned enterprises, and then they find out their own business niches, and they set off on themselves by, I don't know, importing foodstuffs to service the Chinese communities. And eventually they create an entrepreneurial community of their own. So it's huge. Just to give an idea, when I was in Angola, and Angola and the rest of Africa, to be honest, I participated in so many meetings where I was so kindly welcomed and hosted by my Chinese counterparts that I felt uneasy by not being able to speak Mandarin. So I started learning. I've got about, when did I start learning? It's about 7 years now of Mandarin speaking. Don't test me because
I won't speak of myself.
Because it's still terrible. But I felt the urge and the need to get to know the language. It is dominant. It can't be avoided anymore.
And on the ground roots, the actual people, the day-to-day people who live, who don't work in your field, how have they taken the influence of China physically being there, cooperating
it's
and sometimes not cooperating?
It's the usual. So, they're treated as, unfortunately, it happens in Europe as well with citizens from one part of Europe migrating to another part of Europe being considered second-class citizens, being discriminated and so on. When you have an invasion, quote unquote, of people from a different culture or a different part of the world, they tend to become scapegoats. So anything that goes wrong is their fault, right? But it's normal. People will. I think people in the world, and again going back to the generational gaps, people from these newer generations are much more citizens of the world. And again, thank you internet for that. And they can understand a lot better and integrate new cultures. Unless you live in the center of the United States, and life is a big Trump rally. But I guess you need to take that with a pinch of salt.
That's right. Because you travel quite often to Africa.
I do, yeah.
To different countries, to different cities. You're there sometimes when I email you or when I call you, either goes to voicemail, I'm not here, or in your email signature, I'm off globetrotting in Africa again. Okay, he's off again. If someone were to on a more cultural side, if they were to visit, if they haven't been, to the continent before, or perhaps if they've been to the most generic places, if they've been to sort of holiday spots, and sort of even in Egypt or places like this, where would you think would be a good place for them to experience how it's developing, and the side of Africa where we don't perhaps
Rwanda, undoubtedly.
Because you've got your charity there, obviously,
yes,
and you're doing a lot of good work with them. So.
But I'm privileged because under President Kagame, or President Kagame, as we call it in Kinyarwanda, we have the foresight of his leadership, and the creation of infrastructure. Do you know that, for example, there is at least one company manufacturing laptops in Rwanda?
No.
Do you know that there is a company, very good company, Mara Phones, manufacturing phones in Rwanda, smartphones? It's incredible, absolutely incredible. There are motorcycles being built in Rwanda. There will be a car assembling plant in Rwanda. It's unbelievable. Do you know that Rwanda is the country in the world, I believe, so if I'm quoting incorrectly, I beg forgiveness, but if it's not the country in the world, it's one of the, with the largest women representation in public office.
Okay.
It's unbelievable.
That's very good.
The whole country is managed as a big corporate. The president sets KPIs. He then brings all his top ministers and so on an offsite. He then gives them their KPIs, and then KPIs are cascaded throughout the entire infrastructure.
From the top down.
Correct. Everybody's got KPIs. Everybody.
Okay.
And they live and die by those KPIs.
Very good.
And sometimes it's like, how do you call it? That TV show where the guy would say, "You're fired."
Apprentice.
The Apprentice, exactly.
With Donald Trump as well.
Well, yes. Although President Kagame is a much nicer and better leader, at least in my eyes.
Oh, very good.